Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are excited that so many of you could join us today for Alice Sparkly Cat on Postcolonial Astrology. I'm Alex Elliott, the Senior Manager of Events and Engagement for the Public Programs Department of California Institute of Integral Studies, a nonprofit university in San Francisco. As many of us are descendants of settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, we, CIIS public programs, must recognize and never forget that our university's building in San Francisco occupies traditional unceded Ramaytush Ohlone lands. If you are interested in learning more about native lands, languages, and territories, we encourage you to visit native-land.ca. Now, let me first introduce our presenters, Alice Sparkly Cat and Kira Taborn, and then we'll get right to their conversation. Kira Taborn is an astrologer, educator, and creator passionate about intersectionality and accessibility within the astrology community. She produced an astrology and culture magazine called Influx that centered and celebrated POC and queer folks in spirituality, art, and activism. She now focuses most of her time on readings, education, and her offering, Deep Seekers, a virtual monthly meetup for astrology enthusiasts. She has recently become the director of Fresh Voices in Astrology and also organizes regular meetups for astrologers locally and around the world. Her first book, Zodiac Signs, Pisces, was released in February of 2020. Alice Sparkly Cat is a queer POC astrologer and the author of Postcolonial Astrology. They use astrology to rechart a history of the subconscious, redefine the body in the world, and reimagine history as collective memory. Their astrological work has been showcased at MoMA, Philadelphia Museum of Art, Brooklyn Museum, and Hauser and Wirth Gallery. They've been featured in Bon Appetit, Autostraddle, Go Magazine, Astrology.com, Rest for Resistance, Refinery 29, Season of the Bitch, 8 Ball Radio, and more. And now it is my absolute pleasure to turn it over to Alice Sparkly Cat and Kira Taborn.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank
and
you.
Hey, Ace.
Hi, how are you today?
I am so good. I'm enjoying Jupiter and Pisces. The weekend so far. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Yeah, it's a little bit later over here than it is for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am stoked to talk to you today
Yeah, me
about
too.
your book. It's cool. I guess people might not know that we know each other.
We do know each other. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was living in Brooklyn, we met, I don't know. I think the first time we met actually might have been at one of your book launches.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I
I
think
don't know how
so.
we met, but I remember going to work on that garden, and then Grace was like, "Oh, Kira lives here."
Yeah.
And then
No, I think the first time we met, I came to one of you were had a book launch because this is not the first book that you've written. And I came to basically meet you, but I don't think we actually talked at the time because it was everything was happening. But I wanted to ask you to be an Influx, which ended up happening, which is coming back, which is exciting. But regardless, people should know that Ace and I have known each other for about, I guess, 2 years now, a year and a half or so. And yeah, we've hung out a few times. You've come to some dinners and
yeah, we've had dinner. We've talked on the phone.
We've talked on the phone. You've been on my podcast twice.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have some rapport.
Right.
But anyway, it's cool to be talking to you in this professional context. And about your book, because it's truly it's a gift to astrology. I think it's something that's been so needed for so long, and I don't even think people knew how much it's needed, or recognize that need that you have filled with this book. And yeah, there's so much I want to talk to you about. So
thanks for reading it.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for writing it. I wanted to start just by asking why why you wrote this book, like what spurred you to write it? Was there anything in particular? Was it just like something that's been brewing over time, like within you? Tell me more about the why behind it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people have a troubled relationship with Western astrology, and just, yeah, myself included. Like, and like once you like kind of like go like deeper into it, you kind of see it. It's like it's all the binaries. It's the names of the planets, the Roman names. It's some of the concepts. So I feel like there's a lot of questions that just kind of keep coming up around Western astrology, around like tropical astrology too. It's climate-based system, so it kind of centers one type of climate over other types of climates. And climate, it's something that's changing all the time. And so like I really kind of wanted to like follow that curiosity, like the why of Western astrology.
Right. Yeah. How long did it take you, like from the idea to like you finally handing in your, your first draft?
Well, like it was a year. I had a deadline, and then but like a lot of the ideas, like just kind of like that convoluted relationship with Western astrology, like that's been something I've been like processing for like maybe 5 years too.
Yeah. I figured it's sort of like something that's been accumulating and bubbling up within you for a while that you didn't realize was necessarily a book until a couple years in. But can you speak a little bit more to your thoughts around Western astrology and the discomfort you have with certain parts of it, like you mentioned the names of the planet, like the Roman names of the planets, the binaries, like, I'm curious if you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, like just kind of like learning, learning any type of astrology. I feel like everyone's just like, well, why does it work? Like that's kind of like a guiding question that like comes up like over and over and always has different like questions attached to it. But Western astrology, like it's not the first type of astrology that I was introduced to. Like when I was 3, I was introduced to like how to tell time by learning the Chinese zodiac. So I feel like when like I got into Western astrology, it was because I was moving through some really hard like personal things, and like I found it to be a really useful language for talking about pain. But then like I guess there's the why. Like why is it so useful for talking about pain?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I the way I look at it, around that, like, why does it work?
Yeah.
Or more, I guess more, because I don't think anyone knows why it works, or even like how it works.
Right.
I think we can more unpack the how than the why.
I like
maybe
that.
not.
Yeah.
But like when I contemplate that how myself, especially when we talk about there's so many different types of astrology. It's like, how does all of it work? How does sidereal work and tropical work? And I always come back to like perspective. And it's like, well, what perspective are you looking at it? Like if it's like a prism, what angle are you looking at it from? And I wonder if you like, is that something that has come to you throughout this work? Like, because when I first started learning astrology, some astrologer at some point had said that, like, maybe Vedic astrology, or using the sidereals. Well, no, I'll say Vedic astrology works really well for people who are from that region of, because of culture and because of, X, Y, and Z. So that kind of can explain like why both can work, but I'm curious as to your thoughts around that.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. So I feel like when I got into astrology, like there was like maybe even a little bit of a guilty feeling. Like, is this my culture? And yeah, so that kind of like went into it. I like what you said about the prism, because I feel like so much of astrology is a prism. It's like it's so associative. It's like every symbol, like there's this deep historical context, but then we're not looking at it linearly at all. We're looking at it almost like it's a collage. So then Western astrology, like it's not actually Western origin, but then it's Western how it functions. It's Western how it's like remembered and memorialized.
Right. Yeah. That's so real. Cause I mean, something I like to tell my students or remind my students of all the time, which is, I think, so important to remember, is that the type of astrology, at least that I'm teaching and that a lot of us use, Hellenistic astrology, or astrology that has roots in Hellenistic era, or even medieval, but especially Hellenistic. It's like, this was an astrology that was made in a particular period of time where there's particular customs and social norms. And it's the astrology of you within a system, within a society. It's not necessarily about like you and your psyche. It's about how you fit in with the world around you. And yeah, I just think throughout time, you know, we're kind of removed from that like root of where like the people that we don't really know who it was, right, who developed Hellenistic astrology, like the specific people who developed these specific, in terms of the roots of it, kind of a mystery. But still, it's like really, I think, important to remember where we are in space and time when we're talking about like those origins. And when we talk about like the guest host relationship, in terms of like rulership and planets and other planet signs and stuff like that, it's like that comes from Greek culture, right? So yeah, I guess the question I'm getting to, or what I'm trying to get to, is like, what parts of astrology, or I should say like Western astrology, do you see? Well, I guess in terms of like that, coming back to perspective, right? And it's like, where are you? What type of astrology are you using, and where are you coming from? What perspective are you looking at it from? Do you have any thoughts on like why? Yeah, I guess like expanding on that, like why you think that this particular astrology that we both of us use a lot of works so much for us and our clients, and maybe like, would you recommend other types of astrology to certain people?
Yeah, I feel like it works so well because we have to reckon with the West. Like when we talk about the sun, its father, like we have to reckon with the patriarch. We have to reckon with all this stuff. The moon, its reproduction. We have to reckon with reproductive exploitation all the time. So like it shows up in our lives. It impacts our lives. The West does. So then like Western astrology, like we can use it to talk about the West. Like that's why I feel like it works so well to talk about pain sometimes. And like it's not really great for talking about everything, but it's good for some things.
Can you elaborate more on using it to talk about pain, and like in what ways? Can you give an example, or what ways do you use it to talk about pain?
Yeah, like Jupiter, I mean, institutional wounds. With Mercury, I mean, I feel like with Mercury, a lot of times, like just the idea of like being heard and having a voice can bring out a lot of pain sometimes. Yeah, I feel like there's like just all the planets, they have something to do with pain, especially. And then like if I'm like, if I'm doing like maybe another form of divination, like maybe it's more focused on change. Maybe it's more focused on something else, but I found like just, I mean, over the years that like there's something about Western astrology that is really great at just kind of like putting a spotlight on like pain points.
Yeah. Do you feel like writing this book was a way to process the reckoning of like using Western astrology?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I mean, because I think a lot of us sit with that, right? Like the type where, just, but you're so spot on with like how it works so well, because it is a system that was developed by what eventually, like the people that eventually inspired the people who, created the world we live in right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like something that you're right. It's just like we're always having to reckon with the West, no matter if you're here or not here, right? It's like it affects everything.
Right.
I want to ask you a little bit about just like the structure of the book. You kind of go into each of the 7 traditional planets. We were lucky enough at Fresh Voices to have you come teach a little workshop webinar based on the way you wrote the book, but kind of zeroing on the sun, and that was phenomenal. So yeah, can you talk a little bit more about the structure of the book and sort of like why you chose to structure it that way?
Yeah. I wanted to kind of like take some of the oppositions in astrology, which like, this, like the luminaries, Saturn, Venus and Mars, Jupiter and Mercury, which they rule opposing signs. So then they're read in opposition to each other a lot of the time. So I wanted to kind of take that, and then I wanted to look at each of them individually, but then together to like kind of create a dichotomy from the binary. And then what ended up happening was that I was focused on the moon and Saturn, and that like everything I was kind of finding about these 2 planets, it was about like values. So I wanted to talk about capital with the luminaries and Saturn. With Venus and Mars, what kind of happened was I thought I was going to explore gender, but then I found out like, whoa, like gender is really about war. So then that chapter ended up being about power. And then what happened with like Mercury and Jupiter was that I was like, oh, like, Mercury is language and Jupiter is these big institutions. So I thought that it would be about representation at first. And then I was like, maybe it's about technology, because I wanted there to be a material basis for each of the chapters. And then I found out, well, technology doesn't like really exist. Like I thought it did, but it doesn't. Like technology really just like covers up labor. So then that chapter ended up being about labor. And then I ended up rewriting a lot of it too.
Okay. Yeah, because it sounds like you, like the writing process seems like you were set off on certain directions and like kind of took turns along the way.
I'm a little bit confusing in how I write.
No, I don't mean like the way you're writing.
Okay.
I just mean the way that you're talking about the writing process.
I see. Yeah.
No.
Oh,
you write beautifully.
Yeah, like I rewrote Venus and Mars too, because like at first like I wanted to write about like queer pleasure, but then I realized like, hey, like I don't really want to define like the positive. I'm like, that's for everyone to kind of live, so I just wanted to talk about power in like maybe more of a like negative way.
So Saturnian.
Yeah, I know.
I love it. I'm the Jupiterian, you're the Saturnian.
Oh,
we
that's
balance
true.
each other out nicely.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm curious, like a lot, because you've been writing, right? This is what, the 4th book you've written?
Yeah, I made 2 books self-published, and then we were in that series together.
Oh yeah, okay, that's right. So yeah, you've been writing for a long time. You write tons of blogs, horoscopes, amazing memes, and then you also do client work. You work with clients, and so I'm curious how much of your client work has informed this writing?
Oh, everything. Yeah, I feel like everything about astrology I learned from doing client work. I mean the technical stuff like from books and stuff, but then like the flesh of it is just listening to people talk about how they how they live their experiences.
Do you, so yeah, I guess where my next question is, the type of clients you get, basically. Like it sounds like you get a lot of clients who are who are people who work a lot, sounds like. People who are sort of stuck, or at least a part of a system that is not working from them in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, I'm just curious if you could speak maybe a little bit more about your client work and how it's informed, not just this, I guess, not just like the way the writing in the book, but it sounds like your whole almost like view around a lot of these topics have been shaped in a lot of ways by your client practice.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And then I'm also like very curious, I mean, about like you, like how your client practice has changed over the years too. But at least
Yeah.
for me, like, I mean, like, yeah, I get a lot of, I mean, most of my clients are queer. And then we talk about gender. Like a lot of times when my clients aren't queer, we don't talk about gender so much. But then like we have to talk about gender when we're both queer
Yeah.
sometimes. And then so I'm like, hey, like, you know, like, yeah, let's talk about gender with astrology then. Like, let's really see what's our like kind of like what's your experience of gender and what are your expectations of gender. I just find it so useful. So I wanted to like, I mean, I wanted to make something that like I could use, that people who do astrology like client work could use. Like when we talk about the son, when we talk about the father, like let's talk about the idea of father. When we talk about yeah, mother, let's talk about like, you know, this nuclear family. What does the family kind of mean to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. You're a night chart, right?
Yeah, I am.
I love talking to astrologers who, for anyone listening, night chart just meaning Ace was born at nighttime after sunset before sunrise.
I
I
know
was
your
born in
day
the middle of the
chart.
day. And I'm
Yeah.
such a diurnal. I'm so diurnal.
Really?
And it's always I love hearing my night chart colleagues talk about their client practice because it's not so different maybe from mine, but it feels like it is because mine is so diurnal in that I'm always talking about the future. I'm always like,
Oh,
I'm always
whoa.
forecasting.
Yeah.
Not all the time. A lot of it is just like listening to what's happening and then giving context around that and then saying, okay, well, here's the cycle.
Yeah.
This is probably when things change, or this is probably when that ends. And like, I'm always looking at timing. I'm a big timing freak.
Yeah.
And so I say that to say that I love hearing you and, you know, other night chart astrologers talk about their client readings because they're so deep and there just seems to be, you guys have these conversations about really important topics like gender, and not to say that things don't come up in my practice, but I feel so much more like removed, like so diurnal, like up in the sky, kind of like looking at
You
things
just
from a
blew my
different
mind.
perspective.
I was like, I didn't even know like a reading could, I mean, talk about the future somehow. I'm like, I'm always talking to people about like their baby selves.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, like we can talk about the future too.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I kind of saving this, not really saving it actually, but um I wanted to talk about astrology as time magic because I just that phrase in general like sends shivers through my bones. I'm someone who's big on timing, like I just said. I'm writing a book about it. Like really, you know, timing is a big thing for me. And which is why I love astrology so much. We both have our dignified Saturn in Aquarius. So timing, timing is a Saturn concept, time, the Lord of time, and how time, Saturn sort of constructs this illusion of time for us, right? Just so we know, like this is reality.
Aging.
But I wanted to, like dig into your thoughts around astrology as time magic. Just to quote this one sentence from your book, in the conclusion of your book, on page 291, you just said, astrology is time magic because it frames and reframes temporality. And then you go on to talk about how we use astrology to talk about emotions. And you really, like, when it comes down to it, we're talking about change and how change is the only constant. And that's kind of why astrology is so fascinating, because we are just like, sort of like, yeah, it's about time and the way that time changes and shifts, and how we like to nerd out and track that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, tell us a little bit more about your thoughts around astrology as time magic.
Yeah, like when I wrote this section on change, I had just seen my grandpa, and that was the last time I saw him actually. And he said, "Oh shit, I'm gonna cry." But like, yeah, he died last year, and then around Gemini new moon actually, so it's been a full year. And then yeah, he was like, "Hey, like, he told me that." And the word for animal in Chinese is is dongwu, so is moving thing. And then so he's like, if you're a animal, if you're alive, like you're meant to move. So like, yeah, that's kind of like what I was thinking about when I was writing about like just the change too. But like, yeah, like the time magic thing, like for the past 5 years, I have been working with senior citizens, like elders in immigrant communities, and also kids in immigrant communities. So like even like a synastry chart, like that's time magic, because you're looking at like different generation Plutos, different expectations of social transformation, and you're looking at them existing in the same moment, with which is the present. And there's something so amazing about that. There's something so amazing about like just hearing these stories from the silent generation, but then talking with like Gen Z kids like all on the same day, like relationships, like that's time magic. I think that's what astrology does. It's like it kind of forces us to be curious about ourselves, but also about relationships, about where we overlap.
Wow. Yeah, it's again so night versus day, and I love it because you're talking about time as in very much centered in the present moment, but sort of like layering through like people, like the layering of time through through like people who are alive right now. And I think that's so interesting but I think it's interesting that you're not using it to look at the future.
You've alerted me to this new use of astrology, Kira. Oh my, like we can think about the future.
Yeah, wow.
That's so optimistic. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can build a future.
It's I'm just keep thinking about our charts and how it makes sense. And speaking, I don't know if you mind like talking about your like SMR, your sun moon rising. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, I'm a Aries sun and Cancer moon and Aquarius rising. Yeah, sorry, I'm a Cancer moon. That's why I almost teared up just now.
But that's why I kind of want to talk a little bit about your Cancer moon, just because like we talked about the moon for 2 hours on my podcast, episode 3 of my podcast. But the way you talk about your Cancer moon really shed light on things about a planet in its domicile, especially the moon, that I hadn't really considered before. And part of that is just you talking about culture and how a planet in domicile can be, it has what it needs, but sometimes it can be a little too much. Sometimes it can be smothering or overwhelming. And you talking about your Cancer moon as like, just, someone might hear that and say, oh, cool, you have a great family, right? Like like your family must be great and cook really good meals. But there is that element of sort of like over culture, being oversaturated with the lunar principle. And even without talking about it as an oversaturation or anything, just talking about it as how deeply immersed you seem to be in your culture, in the culture in which you were raised, your family and your heritage. Like, just curious if you could talk a little bit about that and how that has informed this work as well.
Yeah, my Cancer moon, because it's very close, where it's co-present with my South Node, sometimes feels like a dead weight to me, like my body.
Mm-hmm.
I think that like the thing about food has never made sense to me with Cancer moon. Like I grew up eating 89-cent frozen pizza every day. Like my cousin would say, like, you've never had Chinese food. So like
Yeah.
and part of it is also because like I'm from Henan. So like, you know, in my parents' generation, they saw famine too. So like they were going hungry 5 days a month. Like they didn't learn how to cook. Like all we ate growing up was like wheat paste boiled with like pickled vegetables. So like that's the kind of like my home food. Yeah, I mean, like I guess it's like I say to my clients, like all your placements, they're constantly changing. So the ways that I find home now, like that's evolving all the time too. So I don't experience my Cancer moon in the same ways, but then sometimes it comes up in those familiar ways. Yeah. What about you? You're an Aries moon.
Yeah, my fiery little Aries moon.
Mm.
We talked again. Yeah, we talked about this about a little bit on the show, how just the moon related to culture and in your heritage and your race, really. And yeah, like how you sort of I always like to talk about the moon as like your instincts, like your just like how you would instinctually respond to whatever stimuli, just that like gut reaction. And yeah, as an Aries moon, like I kind of do have built-in defenses, you know, like I feel very, and my Aries moon is ruled by a very strong Mars and Scorpio, you know, so it's very Martian. And I feel like I've, for the past, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, been trying to learn how to like turn down the defense, but also like knowing when to keep it up. Like it's like it's not that I have good boundaries necessarily, it's just the initial reaction response to things, and that it comes from being in the body that I'm in, right? Like being a Black woman in this here United States of America, you're going to be naturally, not to say that everyone is, but it would make sense why, you know, I have a natural defensive response to things. Yeah, because of violence made on bodies like mine. So yeah, I loved talking to you and Bear. We should mention Bear River, our other colleague, about the moon in that context, which I don't think you hear that much about in terms of like the moon related to race and culture as well.
It's your body, it's your like your lived experience,
Right.
it's how you emotionally anticipate things.
Yeah, it's like your physical form, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did we get talking about the moon even? Oh yeah, it's just like your I was just thinking about how your experience as a Chinese American has also informed this work too.
I think in a lot of different ways. Yeah. I mean, so I grew up in Iowa. So I'm also a Midwesterner. And then so I don't know, I feel like that's influenced in many ways too. I feel like I learned how to be Asian American after I like moved to New York and I started working with elders who like had been living in different Chinatowns or lived in different Chinatowns. Because like I was pretty cut off. Like all I knew was kind of the church and things like that.
That makes sense. I always forget you're from Iowa, and then I remember it. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about your work with elderly Chinese people in New York City?
I mean, it's just kind of like going to them and then trying to get them to come together to do like a creative activity. Like they're really sweet. They like to be praised, but they're very bashful. and none of them
Who
have
doesn't?
phones. So
Oh.
you have to like go at the right time when they're eating lunch, but then they'll all talk to each other. So if you catch one, then they'll all come too. So I mean,
Okay.
it's very enjoyable. Yeah.
That's sweet. So how did you get involved in that?
I was working at a nonprofit Asian American Writers Workshop, and
Oh
then
yeah, that's where I met you for the first time.
Oh, okay. Oh, really? There? Yeah, I
It
didn't
was
know.
at one of your book like launches there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was working there, and then well, I mean, yeah, I was in the office, but then we had different programs in different places, so I would go.
Cool.
Mhm.
I want to kind of pick your brain about, I mean, not pick your brain is not really the right word, but I want to talk a little bit about like the future. Because you talk about astrology, how astrology is change and how it's always changing. And I think this book is a testament to that, right? Like you wouldn't like, this is postcolonial astrology. Like we wouldn't have this 10 years ago. Maybe we would have, but it might not have been as well known as this is and is going to be. So yeah, I feel like we're at this. Well, I guess first I want to ask you about your thoughts around where we're at right now in astrology, because it is this very, I think, really cool place that we're in right now.
It is.
It's so cool. Like
Mhm.
I'm kind of stunned that we're even here
Yeah.
talking. Like I'm talking to you about this book you wrote about post-colonial astrology for like a college. Like what? This is happening.
I know. And we have the same mics and color coded
That too.
shirts.
And we're colorful.
Yeah. I matched my shirt to yours. I saw that you were wearing lime green. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna wear like something bright, like the same cut to actually.
I love it. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I did notice.
Nice.
No, but yeah, so talking about again where we're at right now, like what do you think about this moment that we're in right now in terms of astrology?
I'm so excited. Yeah, I feel like we're writing like astrology fan fiction.
Yeah.
Like it's so like kind of fun and sexy and also like yeah, just like enjoyable. Like where people are like Saturn's a he him lesbian. Like I'm like okay, like yeah, it's so much fun.
It is. It is. It's been blowing my mind like on the regular. Even last night, just like I was on Clubhouse, some astrologers were talking, saying things that were just like, oh my God. Yeah, it feels, how do you feel like with your success right now in this moment? Like, did you anticipate this at all?
No. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that I would be able to write a book. I was so happy that I could. Yeah.
Congratulations. It's hard.
Yeah, I'm so lucky. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, tell me more. Tell me more. Like, I'm wondering where you were when you first got into astrology. Um, tell me about that. Like when was that? And like, where were you in your life and sort of what drew you to it?
Oh, okay. Like I was in a really dark place when I got into astrology.
Most of us were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's some addiction issues. Like I was also married. I was in this very abusive relationship and I had to flee. Yeah, I had to get out. And then so I rented this room with no windows. And then the bathroom was facing my room. And there's always like this diarrhea situation. Like I mean, yeah, I don't want to paint you like a better picture. Like I was in a really bad place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what like how did you find astrology, or how did it find you during that tough moment?
I think just by like kind of wanting to see some of the things that I was going through, like some of the pain reflected back. And I was Googling things, and then somehow I found astrology on Yahoo Answers. And then I just like went down the rabbit hole. And then like I was going to like East Village Books, and then they had a whole wall of astrology books. And yeah, I mean, and just got really obsessed with it.
Wow. Yeah. That's what, so you just were Googling like answers around or questions around processing the pain that you were in, basically?
Yeah, I was Googling around like relationship issues specifically. Yeah.
And something like popped up around astrology.
Yeah.
Wow.
What about you? How did you get into it? I don't think
You don't know the story? I feel like I'm always telling the story, so that's why I'm like, okay. I don't want to bore you, but I'm fine to tell it. I just didn't want to retell it. Well, I'm one of those people who has like always kind of been into astrology, but like you were too. It's just Chinese astrology. You knew that probably more than I knew any type of astrology when I was younger, but I was like obsessed with birthdays, and I just always knew everyone's birthday.
Yeah.
It's just this weird thing that I took a lot of pride in remembering birthdays. I just knew they were special. There was just something, and I knew that like the time you were born was special. I didn't know why I knew that, but so yeah, when I was like 10, 11 was when I started really like researching online, mostly because I was like, what boys am I most compatible with? Like that type of thing. And just thought it would be a cool thing to know, like, oh, you like that boy? Like I went to an all-girls school, so we talked about boys a lot. But yeah, oh, like you'd be really compatible with him, whatever. And I was just really into it when I was younger. And then fast forward in college, I was in a really bad place, just so depressed. So like nothing matters, really having like a spiritual like crisis, I guess you could say. Like, what are we here? What are we here for? Like that type of thing.
Yeah.
Nothing matters, but like, why? Okay. So then astrology sort of re-entered my life. Pretty randomly, a friend just mentioned, like, did you know that there's moon signs or something? And I was like, tell me more. And then I saw my chart for the first time, and that was the rabbit hole. I didn't, I like pulled it up one night, didn't sleep that night, just stayed up all night researching. And that was a little over 8 years ago. And here we are.
Wow.
So yeah, I got really obsessed really quick. It was a Saturn transit for me. I don't know if it was for you, but it was my closing Saturn square, Saturn entering Scorpio, my 9th house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was around 22 for me too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it would have been around that same time. Eclipses, all the things.
Yeah. I feel like that dark moment where you're like, what's the point of life? Like that's actually a really good question.
Yeah.
That like only shows up at those moments too.
Yeah. And astrology really helped with it because when you look at your chart, you're like, this is mine. Like, this is my map that the universe like gave me or whatever. Because I remember seeing my chart for the first time and feeling this overwhelming sense of like connection, and overwhelmingly that I was like being seen and witnessed. And it's like, this is your thing. Like, this is your chart.
Yeah.
This isn't just you being a Scorpio, like millions and millions of other Scorpios. Like, this is yours. And that to me was like enough proof that like things mattered.
Yeah. Like, this is your life. This is your time.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times when you're in that place, like you only see yourself in relationship to other people, in relationship to different institutions, and then you get so small. So then it's like, whoa, like here's this map where I can be curious about my experiences, my pain, my joy. Like, yeah,
that's such a good way of putting it. Yeah, because at that time it was like early 20s. is, I think, the hardest time of life, honestly. I think it might be up there.
Right.
Like
It's
up there with like the beginning of puberty is really hard. And then like early 20s, the second puberty, that word is hard for me to say. That one's really hard too, because you're sort of, everyone's like, okay, you're an adult now. You're like, you know, you're 19, you're 20, you're an adult, go out into the world and get a job and make something of yourself. But no one tells you how. It's like the worst time to figure out how to like make something of yourself, because you're still really a child, but you're assumed to act like an adult. And I felt just so like betrayed by the world, which, you know, it's kind of dramatic, but I felt betrayed by the fact that like we were told, okay, I went to this like fancy private school, cool, check. Go to college, check, you know, get a good job, make something of yourself. Like I felt so, I don't know, I just felt like it wasn't fair, like it wasn't that easy. And et cetera, et cetera. But it's just such a hard time in life. And astrology just came to me at that perfect moment where I needed like proof that it was worth it, basically, to like keep chugging along and keep trying.
And I feel like having people who are like also speaking the same language, where they can really, where you can say like, hey, I'm going through this transit, and they're like, whoa, like I can see you in what you're feeling. Like, there's something about that. Even when it's just online, you don't even know the person. It really feels like you've been touched physically sometimes.
It totally. That's the thing about astrology. Like I always say, there's a couple ways you get into astrology. Primarily, most people will get into it because it really helps with self-acceptance, and you can sort of like learn about yourself from this different perspective and be like, this is just the way I am, you know, not to say that you shouldn't like, you know, be a good person or whatever, but but yeah, it's like, you know, that was huge for me. It was like, oh, I'm just like a Scorpio with like Mars and like Sun, Mars, Pluto. Like I'm supposed to be this intense, you know, it's like, it's in the stars, you know, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just who I am. So I think the self acceptance part is so important. And then the timing piece again. And I think a big part of it was, which it sounds like you went through, and I was going through in a totally different scale, but like knowing that it's going to end, knowing there's an end date to the suffering is like so valuable. And you know, everyone says like, oh, like with time you'll get better, or just give it time, or it's not like this forever. But with astrology, you can whip out your ephemeris and be like, yes, this is when that Saturn transit is over.
I see.
You know?
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it for me too.
Right. Being able to see the cycle instead of like an abstract idea.
Exactly. Do you use astrology for timing at all? Timing stuff at all?
Like for like doing things, like planning to do things. I actually I actually maybe don't. I mean, like just because like whenever I like want to do something, I want to do it right away.
Aries problems. I get that. Just, I mean, even, do you ever look at it for like, you look at your solar return chart, I'm assuming?
I do. Yeah.
Like kind of looking at what's to come.
I look at, I'm a Pisces solar return moon this year. Last year was a Scorpio solar return moon.
Oh yeah, they go in those like water, or not water, but the elemental trios. Kind of going back to the to the book a little bit. I wanted to ask you about, before we get into questions and stuff soon, I wanted to ask you about your like research, just like your process for writing it, and if and how you did research. And let's start there. Like the writing process and like the research accumulating of all the knowledge process.
Yeah, yeah. I read 100 books to write this book,
Oh
and
my
I
God.
didn't use all the material, but
Ace,
like
that's a lot of books.
it is, yeah. It's like, I mean, this bookcase was half full when I
Wow.
started, and then now it's full. But like, I would just pick up like free things also, because like my friend gave me like a JSTOR login, so I would just
Mm,
go in and search like sun or light and see what came up
mm,
also. And then yeah, I mean, a lot of it was like compiling, and then I would pull out things, and then like kind of like retype the lines in my notes, and then I would organize it by sections. So then the ideas started coming together during the reading process. Like that's why there's so many citations, is because
mhm.
like most of the process was about reading. The writing went very fast. Like each chapter was a day of writing,
Wow.
and then the reading part was like the most laborious maybe.
And then like kind of the note taking and all of
Yeah, and
that.
organizing, yeah,
That
keeping
makes
every,
sense.
yeah, yeah. So there's
Taking
some,
notes in my
yeah,
brain now.
there's, yeah, there's a list of errata. I maybe mixed up some people's names and stuff that will
Okay.
change. Yeah.
Wow. So what types of books did you read? Like obviously it wasn't all
Mhm.
astrology books. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I was reading, I mean, there were some astrology books. There's a book about there's a lot of material about Saturn, Saturn's
Mm,
the Renaissance, Saturn the Middle Ages, things like that.
mhm.
I was reading a lot of I mean, I was reading Agamben because he uses a lot of Latin concepts, and then I would try to map them out. Like I kind of used him as a whole through which a lot of like postmodern thinkers were pulling from, but then he would like kind of use the Latin concepts. And then I was reading a lot of Sarah Ahmed because she writes about orientation, and astrology is about orientation. And
Mhm.
then so I was really interested in that. I was reading like, what's that book's name? I can, yeah, like this the politics of feeling. Yeah, that was a really
Mm,
important book for the moon chapter. I was reading Grace Allen Chen, Ray Chow, like just kind of like things I had already been familiar with too, because there's a lot of astrology that already shows up in post-colonial theory.
mm,
Like there's a lot of references to like the nocturnal body of colonialism. And then so I was reading Sylvia Winter, her essay Unsettling the Coloniality of Being was probably like the guiding essay for the book,
okay.
because in that essay she looks at the spirit flesh divide, which,
Mm,
yeah, fate and fortune. Yeah, and
wow.
yeah, a lot of different things, yeah, but also like Twilight and 50 Shades of Gray.
Huh.
I Yeah, I read this book
Which
about
ones did you, what were you reading those for? Or
for the Venus and Mars
okay, that's
chapter.
what I
Yeah,
thought.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Also like this book about like boys love, BL, yeah, things like that, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow. That's so much research.
Yeah, it was fun,
It
yeah.
sounds amazing. I love that. Um, you said you just said real quick, like astrology is about orientation. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I feel like that's the chart, right? Like it orients you to the
Mm,
world. So then like, well, the houses, and then the
right.
fixed, yeah, the constellations and things.
Okay,
Yeah,
I see what
yeah.
you mean. I
Mhm.
love that because I always like to talk about how it's about where you were in time and in space.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that moment in space time, and you
Mhm.
like become that moment in space time. And
Mhm.
so yeah, thinking about it that way is like it orients you in space time as well.
Right.
You look at a chart and it's sort of like yeah, put you into a place in like a moment in time and space.
Yeah.
Um,
In
to
history, but also geography too.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. Um, wow, okay. And I'm like,
Yeah.
all the little data points are moving around in my head.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
cool. So you did a lot of research from a lot of different angles.
Mhm.
Um, I know you just listed a bunch, but anything in particular that like, yeah, any piece in particular, outside the ones you just listed that, really it's like popping up for you that you think that would be interesting to share, that you came across in your research?
I think like the most powerful moment when I was researching is when I found like 2 PDF books online. No, I think I bought the ebook for these books actually. And then it was like just kind of random. And this was like this was like it was like 2 books. I can't remember the titles. Like I have no memory of any names, but
That's
like one book was talking about how like colonialism pushes death like outward from the capital. And then another book was like it was mapping like the movement of body parts and like through like organ donation. And it was like, hey, like colonialism actually extracts living flesh from the colonies and brings it to the capital. And I was like, whoa, like there's this constant moving of life and death. Like just kind of looking at these 2 texts like together, that was like just like really harrowing. So that was a really powerful moment in the research. And there were moments like that too. I think when when I was researching Venus and Mars, just like seeing some of the older Hebrew texts about like a city under siege and how these cities become gendered. And then like kind of reading about like the state of war after the Cold War, like there was something that just kind of clicked through that experience too.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm like, okay, now we need to find the names of these. Yeah, wow. Okay. I'm thinking, well, I guess one thing I wanted to like maybe to close out, I think this might close us out, depending on how long we want to talk about it. But I did want to talk a little bit about I've been kind of popping all around. Where's your Mercury at?
Oh, my Mercury's at Pisces.
It's in Pisces. Okay. Mine's in Sag. So we have the
Yeah.
detrimental Jupiterian Mercury is kind of running all over the place. But I wanted to circle back because we talked a little bit about like this moment in time that we're in right now, this moment in space time that we're in right now with astrology, and how neither of us really anticipated this at all. And how cool it is, right? That we are able to not just like talk about these things, but expand on them. And what did you say? You said something like it's in a phase where, what did you say? You were talking about being really playful, but you said something that it was like we were developing
like fan fiction.
Yeah, for astrology, which it really does feel like that a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It's so nice. What do you see? I know we don't talk about much about the future. I know you're not, but what do you see coming? Like, do you have any ideas as to what lies in astrology's future?
I don't know. Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't spend that much time thinking about the future. So this is maybe like a weak spot for me, actually. Yeah.
I mean, that blows my mind because it's like, when am I not thinking about the future?
Whoa. Yeah.
This is apples and oranges, right?
Yeah. I think about the past a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think
definitely
will
a
come?
Cancer moon thing. Well, I am excited to see more pieces, like more work like yours, more critical pieces using astrology to comment on the state of the world and the institutions that we dwell within, and just more. I think community is a big thing right now with Saturn in Aquarius and Pluto about to enter Aquarius. And we're talking a lot more about just communities in general and how we can better support each other. And I think more importantly, maybe not more importantly, sorry, but also craft and create communities or structures for communities to exist in that are safe and equitable and, you know, good for everyone and not just a couple people. So, yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing how that continues to shape up within the astrology community. And I'm also just excited to see how astrology continues to be more utilized by people who like aren't astrologers, and aren't into astrology. Like, I'm interested to see where astrologers doing more consulting for other industries and other types of people. Because it's really useful knowledge, I'm like, people are kind of catching on.
Right. Like there's musicians like using astrology to write music.
Right.
Like, like you don't have to do client work to be an astrologer. You can, there's a lot of different ways.
Yeah, exactly. But you also host community as well too. So it's not like, yeah, I'm curious like how that has been going for you. Yeah, because you've been sort of hosting gatherings yourself too, right?
Well, that was my day job for 5 years is making community programs. So like, I mean, this last year's been weird with community stuff because it's all like kind of virtual. And I don't love like virtual events because like and rightfully like people want their cameras off, people are tired, like people are shy. But I like to see people face to face.
But you have been hosting some like monthly gatherings for people who sort of subscribe to your website, right?
I do. I have a reading group. So I have these people that I read things with every month.
So good.
It's fun. We read some like Ursula Le Guin together. We read her essay on like myth making and science fiction.
Cool.
We read like some things, like some essays that people were writing on LiveJournal in 2009 about representation in myth, in speculative fiction.
That's amazing.
We have a lot of fun. We talk about things.
Do you talk astrology as well? Or is it mostly just reading?
So like a lot of the things they relate to astrology. For example, we read Sylvia Wynter's essay and it's like, hey, this is about fate and fortune. But like, this month, next weekend, we're gonna be looking more just like getting groundwork for traditional astrology, because then we can read more. Then we're gonna read Banu Subterraneum and like Darwin's Ghosts, and really look at like the cultural workings of science. Feminist science. And so I'm really excited. We're gonna do some astrology and then like kind of like deep dive into every step. I'm so excited.
Awesome. That's such a great, I think people need that and are craving things like that. And speaking of, it's funny, Alex read like an old bio of mine. So a lot of those things aren't spot on anymore, but I do have a membership community called the 11th House. And we have a Discord, and there's definitely a group getting together to read your book within my membership community. Which is really cute. So they're going to be book clubbing your book. I'm excited to see how that goes. But I mean, I'm just grateful for you and other folks within our community, just like creating spaces within the larger astro community space, because there's so many different niches and things that people are interested in. And I don't know, I just feel like folks are really grateful for you being in this community and for the work that you make.
Thanks. Me too. I'm glad that like you're here. I feel like you're like you hold people together, and you also like give us more energy too, in a really like kind of sincere way.
Oh, thank you. It's funny you said hold people together. I'm like, that's what you do. You've been involved in other community projects too, like the Queer Astrology Conference last year. You just aren't as loud about it as I am.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you doing that work and just all the work that you do. I don't know how you do all of it actually, Ace. Like, can that be my last question? How are you writing all these things and doing readings and working and making great memes? Like, how do you do it all?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you do a lot more than me. So like, I don't know. I'm like Saturn's in my first house now. I'm a little bit busier, but before I was sleeping for like 12 hours a day. So I feel like I don't do that much.
I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, I do a lot, but
Mhm.
I couldn't do the things that you do. Like the writing, the way that you crank out writing is something that is completely foreign to me. So yeah, it's admirable. Do you write like every day?
Oh yeah, I write every day, but I've always written every day because I would write like dirty fan fiction every day as a
Okay.
kid.
So you're
Yeah.
used to just being in that flow of just like letting it pour out of you.
Yeah, I used to write a chapter a day
Oh my God.
when I was a teen.
Jealous.
Yeah, updating like very quickly. Yeah.
Oh gosh, take me back to live journal, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was really it's just like fun talking to you always. Um, should we answer some questions? Should we
Yeah.
see if people what people what other people have to say? So
Yeah.
I'm going to read them out. Question from Finnegan Saturn. I found so many facets of the astrological community in learning astrology very inaccessible to disabled folks like myself. I'm wondering about the ways you want to see astrology become more accessible. Where have you seen a big lack of accessibility, not just disabled folks, but to marginalized folks as well? Do you want to start with that one?
Yeah. I feel like this last year, like Zoom, it's like it's like kind of like open some things up because you don't have to physically go to spaces, but then it's also like closed some things down too, where it's like, I mean, yeah, not everyone has internet, like not everyone has technology, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's like really shuttered some things. And then it's, yeah, I mean, I like because like sometimes I'll be like, oh, like you don't have to have your video on, like we can do a phone call if
Mhm.
like the Zoom doesn't work for you, like kind of trying to find ways to navigate through it. um I noticed like someone once offered like to get an ASL interpreter because their insurance covered it at an event, and I was like, yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's hard to like do an event and then like pay an ASL interpreter like a adequate fee sometimes if you're not with a larger institution. But yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that things like that just need to become more standard, like
Yeah.
um budgeting in ASL interpreters,
Yeah.
making sure that we can have live captioning,
Mhm.
live transcripts even.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many things that not like the world has to do to become more accessible, especially in astrology.
Mhm.
Um, there's a whole like I'm so many things are pinging in my head. I'm like, do we have astro books in braille? Like,
Mhm.
are we, yeah, do we need more ASL interpreters, I think, especially at conferences.
Mhm.
And then in terms of making things more accessible to marginalized folks as well, um, the cost is always an issue, I think, for anything, right?
Yeah.
So more scholarship opportunities, more sliding scale opportunities for events like this one, which is great. Um, and I would say there's there there's also a piece, I think, to making to accessibility that has a lot to do with um like making sure the information that you're portraying, speaking about, you're using accessible language as well, that you're
Mhm.
not speaking like you're talking to, like, I don't know, like grad school at like Oxford University or something. I don't know. Just making things accessible on all levels it's a difficult challenge, but it's a challenge that I think that like us as a community should absolutely continue to take up and be louder about.
I also feel like there's so many more disabled astrologers, which like yeah. I mean, like that's just, I mean, it makes things more accessible because then you're speaking from the eye.
Yeah. This next question is a biggie. A question from Ola. How can we decolonize astrology? I'm gonna let you take that one, Ace.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's like not a question for me because I'm a settler.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. How would you I guess that, yeah, that's a good answer. I'm trying to see how else we could angle that, but I mean, I would say start by first reading Ace's book and sort of pondering that pondering, that question after reading the book. Because I think that's a really layered question, right? There's no just like way to do it, I don't think either. Not just like a way. There's like, a million different ways to go about it, and probably a lot of different ways that you need to go about it, in order to accomplish that goal eventually one day. But yeah, I like your answer. You can't really talk about that.
I feel like like with Western astrology, like we shouldn't try to save it. We shouldn't try to like integrate different types of astrologies like into it to like somehow make it more multicultural. Like
right.
That's not the point. The point is to say like what's Western astrology doing and to like kind of cut that down and to make it more specific. So it's not universal.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, that it's not about changing it to be this like perfect astrology, but recognizing the type of astrology it is and staying grounded in it, in the type, like where it came from and what it is and what it does. And like you said, making that more narrow and not saying that this one type of astrology can apply to everyone on this globe. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah.
Cool. Next question from the audience is, do you have any tips for aspiring authors or tips for finishing a book? What was your practice/ritual like?
Yeah. Oh, my own.
Yeah.
Like, so I finished it like during the pandemic, which changed things because before that I was working, and so it was really hard to find like just any time, like a whole day, for example, to work on something. But then the pandemic hit, and I mean, like I was kind of playing hooky a little bit, so I was just working on the book. But I mean, a tip I have would be to like give yourself a deadline before your actual deadline, because then you can go in and change things. And another tip I have is to figure out how many words you write a day, and then to realize like, yeah, you can write a book in a week, but then like it's the other parts that are more like time consuming. So then you want to plan for those parts, actually.
Yeah, the research and all of that.
Yeah.
I don't have tips because it's so hard. Like I'm not I'm writing a book right now. I wrote a book. It was really hard. I'm not good at it. So I don't know if I have any tips. I'm not the one to ask. I think for me, a big part of it is like just the discipline of getting your ass in front of your computer and writing. And even if it feels impossible, just like making yourself do it, and also giving yourself, cutting yourself some slack because writing a book is really hard. at least for me, it is really hard for me. It's really hard to get myself to write. And I think it's just writing is really, it's just hard for me. It's hard for me to like take everything that's up here and like make it into sentences that like make sense. And so kind of, yeah.
We're both Mercury and detriment.
Yeah, people. Exactly. The detrimented Mercuries. Yeah. So my tip is discipline is a really big part of it. I would say if you want to do if you want to go astrological, like look at your Mercury sign, help support your Mercury, helps like maybe look at your third house and look at, the sign that's in your third house, the planet that rules it. And that will tell you more about like what you need in your sort of like writing process, and that especially when you make it a ritual, which is a very third house thing. Yeah. And if you can just make it like put it into your daily routine. You wake up, you make your tea, you sit in front of your computer for 30 minutes and force something out of you. That's what I need to do, at least. So I'm talking to myself. Yeah. Another question from the audience. Astrology is about how you fit in the world, and you only see yourself in relation to other people. These are quotes, I guess, maybe from us. What areas of a chart would someone explore to delve deeper into these ideas? So, I'll answer this first part because this is sort of like what I'm really into when it comes to astrology. So again, the question was, there was a quote, astrology is about how you fit into the world, quote unquote. And then the other quote, you only see yourself in relation to other people. So the first house is the only part of the chart that is only about you. It's about you, your identity, your body, how you take up space in this world in like a physical and spiritual way, I guess, if we're talking about the first house, because the first house contains the ascendant, which is the point of the eastern horizon where the sky meets the earth, where spirit meets matter, where your soul meets your physical incarnation. So the first house is all about you. And diving deep into not just the first house and any planets there, but most importantly, the planet that rules that sign. So whatever planet is the planetary ruler of your rising sign is going to speak a lot to how you identify with it, in the context of the world that you're in or the societies that you're a part of. And so looking at that planet that rules your ascendant and where it is in your chart, what house it's in, what condition it's in, what aspects it's making, all of that will speak to how you see yourself fitting into the world around, or not fitting in with the world around you. And yeah, I mean, the chart in general is that, like Ace was saying, like that orientation as to like where you are, in space and time, and in the society that you are a part of. Ace, your thoughts on that?
My thoughts. I think the second sentence, you're only who you're in relationship to other people, was something that we said like when we were in our deepest, darkest moments, like not as a like kind of, oh, this is what you should be. Actually. And then I think that like, yeah, I feel like your explanation is spot on. Like looking at the ascendant, the horizon, the only thing I would add is like maybe looking at what's changing in your chart too, because you have the same chart from when you're like, born to like the end of your life. So you have the same chart as a 5-year-old, as a 6-year-old. And then so looking at what's changing at the moment means that you're reading the chart in the context of the present. So yeah, that could be a good place to start also.
I love that. Yeah. My Scorpio stellium was definitely manifested a lot differently when I was like 14 than it does now. There's a lot of similarities. I'm still listening to My Chemical Romance, but it's a little different. That was a good answer. So the next question is, who are some other astrologers today that we should be listening to? Oh, I love this question.
Yeah.
Listening to, reading, following, etc., especially those who are looking at astrology through different perspectives or other angles of the prism. Do you want to start? Because I can go on and on.
Yeah, I feel like I could go on and on too with like naming different people. I feel like Charm is doing
Charm.
really amazing work. Ari Felix is
Yes.
writing like a series of love letters about like different placements all the time. And they're just like they're so rich too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like who else is doing
Diana Rose Harper is a
yeah.
great person.
Mhm.
Bear River. I was going to mention Ari. Um, there's so many good people.
Yeah, there's a lot of different practicing
Oh,
astrologers.
uh, Mercury's Brood, which is an anthology that's coming
Mhm.
out that's contains a lot of diverse and important perspectives as well.
Mhm.
There's
Demetrius is making a documentary.
Demetrius is making a documentary. Alyssa Sorio is another great um, astrologer. Praxis Astrology is her handle. So many goodies. Like
Yeah.
um, Oscar Diaz is like doing amazing work around fixed stars.
Fixed
I would
stars and
say,
poetry.
yes. I would say not to like plug, but like if you are interested in hearing about other astrologers, my podcast, The Astrology Show, I interview amazing astrologers. And we just talk about astrology together. So I would endorse every single person that has been on my podcast. Ace has been on twice, and you know most of the astrologers who have been on. Michael J. Morris is another astrologer. Like so many goodies. But I've had a lot of them on my show. So everyone that I'm gonna name has been on my show for the most part. Yeah, I get really excited when I can talk about other astrologers that I love, and yeah, because there's just so much talent. There's so much talent within our colleagues, and I feel very, very blessed to work with you all in various iterations.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay, so next question is, how has writing this book and doing this research changed your own relationship to astrology and the way you do readings for others?
Yeah, it's changed it a lot. It's made me more certain in what I talk about, I think.
Nice.
Because like before, I was like, I was learning astrology by doing the client work. So I would ask a lot of questions like, how do you experience this planet? And then like after you like, yeah, after you get like, like several thousand answers, then you start to be more certain and you're like, hey, like, yeah, this symbol, and you start to be more certain how you spot like reflections and parallels in terms of the things that people are talking to you about too. um and like writing the book, like seeing the symbols like kind of yeah, in like in one type of narrative, it's made me more certain about like doing like the structure of the reading and the type of work it is too. Yeah.
Awesome. Um, Next question is, pardon me, what do you like to do in your downtime? And that either relates to or doesn't relate to astrology.
My downtime, I play with my cat, Yoongi.
So cute.
Well, I'm a BTS stan, but I'm taking a break from standing BTS right now.
Okay.
I watch Hunter x Hunter. I just finished the whole anime series.
Oh,
Yeah, it's really good. Hunter x Hunter, I feel like, well, this is like, yeah, I bring astrology into it. It's about like 12-year-olds, so it's about a Jupiter return.
oh,
But then their enemy is 28.
wow.
Yeah, so going through their
Wow.
Saturn return. And it's,
Interesting.
yeah, I don't know, a lot of different things. I hang out with my friends. I'm gonna take my cat on a walk to the park this weekend. I got her like a backpack carrier, and then she has a harness, so
Oh,
yeah, hopefully
yay.
she enjoys her time in nature.
Oh, cool. Yeah, for me, my downtime typically is like me I love taking walks. I love take a walk with the J. That's my favorite pastime. Good music, you know, or good podcasts and a long walk and a smoke that will make me happy day or night.
I'm laughing because I feel like you post about this. Like I just
it's my favorite thing to do. I do it every day. I love walking. I love like taking a stroll around like a neighborhood or a place and just seeing in the houses. And it's something I did a lot in New York and Brooklyn. And now that I am out here in LA, I'm like just starting to get into the hang of doing that. So yeah, my downtime, a lot of it is taking walks and also just spending money in some way, usually on my apartment. I've been furnishing my apartment and just like, I want this, I want that, and I gotta get this for that. So that's been fun for me. Yeah. That was a good
you
question.
have a beautiful apartment.
Oh, I can't wait till you can come visit. Please do at some point.
Oh, I do. Yeah, my roommate's in LA actually.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. Come visit sometime. Next question is, okay, answer that one. How is astrology evolving in response to decolonial theory and activism? That's a good one.
Yeah. I feel like it's changing all the time. Like just with like queer play of what the planets could mean.
Yeah.
How people are using it is changing because people use it to create relationships. People use it to flirt. And like it's harder than it looks to create a relationship, and it's more powerful than it seems too, because there's something so alienating about capitalism that when you like create a relationship, like that's important.
Yeah. It's so true. I feel like so many of my relationships have been created through astrology in the past couple of years. Like even someone that I'm like forming a relationship with and talking to, I remember, you know, we swiped each other on Tinder and they messaged me being like, I'm a Gemini, my birthday's tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, and we start talking about their chart, you know? So, yeah, just thinking that's so true. That's a way that it has changed a lot, is like the way that it's forming relationships. And yeah, I would just say that from what I've noticed, I'm sorry, there's a hummingbird right outside my window and I keep getting distracted because it's beautiful. But yeah, I think in general, like astrologers, younger, especially POC, especially QT POC astrologers, are just not taking a lot of shit anymore when it comes to messed up stuff happening within the people saying things that are just not okay, that are racist or xenophobic or what have you, transphobic, what have you. There's a lot of like pushback against a lot of that stuff now that you did not see even 3 years ago, right? Because so much has shifted so quickly, and people are just not putting up with it anymore. And for great, good, because we don't want to. So I think that's a big way I've seen astrology evolving, is just in response to these things. It's just that like we're calling things out, and I think not just calling things out, but with that actively trying to create a safer place for astrologers and for people who are, entering this community and might think that it's just only old white people, and might be afraid that they don't have a space. Not to say that old white people aren't going to give you space, but you don't see if you don't see yourself or people like you reflected in whatever community that you're trying to become a part of, then you're probably going to be less likely to join that community, right? So I think right now there's just a lot of there's more opportunities for queer folks, for people of color, for Black astrologers, for disabled astrologers, for trans astrologers. Like there's so many more opportunities to not just like share your work, but share the work that you are passionate about, that like speaks to your experience. And with that, we're seeing like more people like you can be seen, right? And feel seen and heard. And so that's like a really beautiful thing that I've seen happening over the past, like even, 2-3 years in astrology, that I hope to see continue.
Yeah, I feel like that's what we mean when we say that we're like making astrology fan fiction too.
Yeah.
Because like we don't yeah, maybe an astrology course is a few $100s, but it's not like a whole tuition. So then
Right.
it's like this kind of thing, it's like it's able to happen with astrology.
Yeah. Oh, Ace, this was so fun.
Yeah, it was fun talking to you.
You too. I'm sure we'll talk again soon, but I guess we should close it out for tonight so we don't just keep going forever. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Buy this book. You need to have it. It's really good. I think now that people are gonna read it and sort of like know how you speak, so they'll hear you when they're reading it, which is such a pleasure for me, because I'm like, I'm just like, oh, this is so ace.
Oh, no.
So thank you so much for writing this and for sitting down with me to talk about it.
No, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for chatting and for hanging out.
I think it's about time to invite Alex back up.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope you will join us for more of our upcoming talks and workshops. This conversation was recorded, so if you would like to watch it again or share it with your community, it will be available on our YouTube channel at this same link and on our Facebook page. We will also feature this talk on our podcast, which you can find at CIISpod.com or by searching CIIS Public Programs on your favorite podcast app. Thanks again for joining us and have a wonderful evening.